Hello everyone, my name is Jason, Legislative Chair for the San Fernando Valley chapter of the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Today, we are going to be covering some federal news. Usually we talk about state legislation and litigation, but today we actually have a federal update, and that is the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act. We just had Memorial Day on Monday, which honors the fallen men and women in uniform that have served this country. They gave the ultimate sacrifice in defense of this country and our liberties. To them, we will be eternally grateful. And veterans deserve to be honored and their rights protected as well, which is why H.R. 1041 is such an important piece of legislation. H.R. 1041 prevents the Department of Veterans Affairs from transferring the personal information of veterans to the NICS, the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, if that veteran has a fiduciary to help manage their benefits. Which I'm sure some of you are thinking right now, wait a minute, veterans were getting disarmed because they needed help balancing a checkbook? Yeah, they were. Over 200,000 veterans were reported to the NICS system just because they had a fiduciary. According to the VA, they were deemed as mentally incompetent under the federal statute in 18 U.S.C. 922 G4. The VA has been doing this since the 1990s with very subjective standards on what mentally incompetent meant. And earlier this year, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins, under the Trump administration, announced that they were going to stop this practice. Secretary Doug Collins said in a press release, quote, "Many Americans struggle with managing their finances, and veterans' Second Amendment rights shouldn't be stripped just because they need help in this area. But for too long, veterans who needed the services of a VA fiduciary were deprived of their right to bear arms." What H.R. 1041 does is officially codify this to ensure that a future administration or maybe a future Secretary of Veterans Affairs that might want to reverse course and try to re-implement these asinine reasons for disarming our veterans can't do that. The fact that the VA was able to act like this for such a long period of time and unilaterally decide without any kind of court order or judicial determination that a veteran should be disarmed solely because they needed a fiduciary to help them manage their finances is crazy, and I applaud Secretary Collins and the Trump administration for ending this practice. Overreaching bureaucracy must be reined in, and H.R. 1041 aims to do exactly that. H.R. 1041 passed the House of Representatives on May 21st by a vote of 216 to 201, with the vast majority of the California Democrats in the House voting no, and the vast majority of the Republicans in the House from California voting yes. There were 8 out of 52 yes votes out of the representatives from California. This bill is great because not only does it restore the Second Amendment rights of veterans, but it also restores their Fifth Amendment rights and due process. You see, H.R. 1041 explicitly mentions in the bill text that the veteran has to be proven to be a danger or threat to themselves or others by a judicial body in order for them to be disarmed. A blanket standard that goes for everyone, no matter if you're a veteran or not, that if you're proven by a court of law, that's the key distinction here, by a court of law, by that judicial body, that you are a danger or threat to yourself or others, then you can be disarmed. The bill mentions that if the veteran has a fiduciary, that sole reason for that fiduciary helping them manage their VA benefits and balance their checkbook, that cannot be a reason all by itself to disarm veterans and deprive them of their Second Amendment rights without due process. So not only is this a victory for the over 200,000 veterans that have been wrongfully disarmed, it's a constitutional victory, standing up for the Second Amendment and the Fifth Amendment. And so I'd like to read some of the bill text on what would be added to federal code if this gets signed into law by President Trump. It says, 5501D, determination of mental incompetence is insufficient basis to treat a person as a mental defective. The Secretary shall not treat a person as having been adjudicated as a mental defective solely on the basis that the Secretary has determined that such person 2. Requires a fiduciary under Section 5502 of this title. So explicitly mentioning that just because a veteran has a fiduciary, they cannot be determined to be mentally incompetent solely based on that. And as I mentioned before, the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act just passed the House of Representatives and now moves on to the Senate. So for us here in California, it's our turn to contact our senators, Alex Padilla and Adam Schiff, and tell them to support this bill. I understand that Senators Alex Padilla and Adam Schiff aren't exactly the most friendly, to put it lightly, when it comes to the Second Amendment, but I still think it's our duty to contact our senators to tell them when they should be supporting good legislation. And speaking of Democrats, there are a lot of Democrats in opposition to H.R. 1041, one of them being Representative Mark Takano from California, who had this to say during the House Rules Committee hearing.
H.R. 1041 isn't about defending the Constitution and the rights it bestows upon us, nor is it about preserving a veteran's right to due process. Rather, this bill is purely about the politics of guns. Chair Boss continues to champion a bill that will do nothing but put more firearms in the hands of the most vulnerable beneficiaries in VA's system.
So according to Representative Takano, this isn't about the Constitution or preserving due process. It's all about the big scary gun and the politics surrounding guns. This is all the left has when it comes to gun control. They always want to talk about the gun. The gun is the problem instead of what's been happening to over 200,000 veterans being wrongfully disarmed. Besides, we hear all the time from the left that the police and the military are the only ones trained to use firearms, so they should be the only ones to have them. Except if they need help balancing a checkbook, then all of a sudden they're mentally incompetent and they shouldn't have a firearm. Also, trying to paint the picture that a veteran is somehow more vulnerable just because they need help with finances and therefore they shouldn't be able to own a gun is absurd. It doesn't make sense. So yes, this is about due process. This is about protecting constitutional rights for our veterans, which is why I applaud the 8 representatives from California that voted yes on this bill. And speaking of representatives, this bill was introduced by Republican Mike Bost from Illinois, who is the chair of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. So this bill comes from the House Veterans Affairs Committee, so this is great. The committee is doing its job standing up for veterans. And to give you all some information as to what your local congressional representatives are doing in Congress and what they're voting no against, here are some representatives from the San Fernando Valley that voted no on protecting Second Amendment rights for veterans. Luz Rivas, Laura Friedman, Brad Sherman, and George Whitesides. So I wanted to share that little snippet of information as to what these representatives are voting against, just in case you need to inform your vote further for the upcoming midterms. And there you have it, everybody. That is the latest update from Washington, D.C. and the House of Representatives. H.R. 1041, the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act, just passed the House of Representatives, moves on to the Senate, and we hope this makes it to President Trump's desk so he can sign it. Our veterans deserve the utmost respect, and protecting their Second Amendment rights will go a long way. Also, let us know what you think about H.R. 1041, and remember to contact your senators. Even if you're not watching this video from California, still contact your senators to voice your support for the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act. Thank you everybody for watching, and if you want to stay up to date with everything that the San Fernando Valley chapter of the California Rifle and Pistol Association is doing, make sure you subscribe right here on our YouTube channel and check out our chapter Instagram, which is linked down in the description. Thank you again, and may God bless America.